April 18, 1775, Bobby Newman had to get out of that rooming house without soldiers knowing what he was up to. He went out an upper-story window in the back of the building. Cut across the street, he broke into the church, he waited a little while. A couple of fellows came along and confirmed that night 700 British soldiers would row across the Charles River from Boston Common to Cambridge, and from Cambridge they would march to Concord to arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock for treason. They were British citizens. They were acting against the king. They were hiding out in Concord. Once Bobby had that information confirmed, though, he risked me. This thing. Hey, we got there it is. Here it is. He's going up to that steeple, and for not more than 2 seconds, he opened 2 lanterns. Those lanterns were signaled to 28 men. Paul Revere, William Dawes, Israel Putnam. They were all among them. They were all sitting in Charlestown across the water over here, staring at this steeple. And when they saw that Bobby opened 2 lanterns, they knew what the British soldiers were going to do, knew what route they were going to take. So they rode out across the countryside, started knocking on doors, and quietly let other Minutemen, other civilian militiamen, know what was going on. About 3 a.m. on April 19th, 75 Minutemen showed up on Lexington Common. So did 700 British soldiers. They saw 75 Minutemen. They figured this was silly. 75 Minutemen. It's going to be an easy night. Stop here a second. And it's going to be an easy night. Let's try this one. So at any rate, they fired into the crowd. They killed 11. Kept going. A few miles down the road, they were at North Bridge in Concord. Already there's 1,000 Minutemen waiting for them. Hundreds more poured out of the woods. They ambushed the British soldiers. Now, the British soldiers, they were used to rules in battle. Straight lines, regimented form, people giving orders. And they had no idea how to handle a guerrilla attack. So they started to run back towards Boston, tearing off their bright red coats as they ran so nobody knew who they were. They finally got back to Boston by the morning of April 20th and were pinned down here for the next 11 months. But as a result of the events of April 18th, 19th, and 20th, the American Revolutionary War began right here. Now, it only lasted 11 months in Massachusetts, but the whole war ended up lasting 8 years until 1783. This is where it began. So the rebellion started the revolution here in 65. The rebellion of the war started here in 75. Now, if you look over to the left, there's a red brick line embedded in the sidewalk over here. That line comes from Charlestown, where we're heading. It goes through the north end, Quincy Market, Boston Common. It ends the State Capitol building, and it takes you to some of the historic sites in town. That's the Freedom Trail that I mentioned, and this is stop number 3. From this point here, you can follow the Freedom Trail directly to the Old North Church, Paul Revere's house, Cobb's Hill Burying Ground, restaurants, and pastry shops. Stop 3, stop 3.
Would it be up there or to the left over there?
The red brick, it comes along the sidewalk, then it goes up the hill.
Okay, and that's where you go to get to the things you just mentioned.
All the things I just mentioned, that way. That's, yep. And if you continue straight on that line, it'll take you into the Quincy Market area, and then it'll take you over to the Old State House, up through Boston Common, and a couple of other cemeteries. We try to make it easy for you. Anyway, we're going to head into Charlestown right now. This is the Bill Russell Bridge. They just named it the Bill Russell Bridge, named it in honor of our basketball greats from the Boston Celtics, late 50s through the 60s, and he became a coach and so on. But they just named this bridge, and we're hopefully at the end of a 2-year bridge replacement project that started in 2017. And when we turn the corner over in Charlestown, there's going to be something that looks like an Egyptian obelisk. It's actually a monument to those who died on June 17, 1775, at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was actually fought on Breed's Hill. That's been a decision. So that June morning, 3,000 colonial militiamen sat atop Breed's Hill over here. These were ordinary citizens from all over the way, but most had little, if any, military training or experience. They're up there all night digging trenches, creating a makeshift fort. When the sun came up in the morning, just as they expected, they were surrounded by 2,200 British regulars, redcoats. The British soldiers were pinned down in Boston for a few months. They figured they had boats. They figured if they could get to Charlestown over here, they'd have a capture it. They'd have a pretty good advantage over the strategic spot. Colonial troops beat them to it. So the British soldiers made 2 advances against the colonials up there on Breed's Hill. Minor volleys of musket fire. Very little effect, except that by then the colonials were short on ammunition. They didn't start out with a lot. Their leader hollered out, "Gentlemen, on the 3rd advance, don't fire until you see the whites of the redcoats' eyes." That was meant to save ammunition. So the redcoats started up in their 3rd advance. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon by this point. They're fighting all day already. The British soldiers were wearing heavy woolen uniforms in the middle of June. The temperature that day was in the 90s. It was humid. Each is carrying 100 pounds of equipment. They start up this 3rd time. They're hot, they're miserable. They're wondering why no one's shooting. They figured the colonials must be ready to surrender. The British took it easy. They let down their guard. Then they got within about 30 feet of the colonials, the point to which each could see the whites of the other's eyes, about from here to the back of the vehicle. Gunfire erupted. 90 minutes later, 1,100 British soldiers were dead right here. Big field littered with bodies. Grim. Now, we lost maybe 400 colonial soldiers, outnumbered the British more than 2 to 1. But they were out of ammunition. They abandoned the hill. British captured the hill and won the battle. This was such a bloody battle. This was such a great loss of life to the British. This was a victory for morale for the colonials. Now these people realized they had everything it would take to beat the mighty British Army. War lasted 8 more years. As far as these people were concerned, they won it here in Charlestown. That's why we have the monument. To battle we lost, but we have a monument. Now, heading down to the Charlestown Navy Yard, the USS Constitution down here.